You're listening to the Sketchnote Army podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook. And this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. Hey, are you looking for the ideal sketchbook for your sketchnoting practice? The Sketchnote Idea Book is the sketchbook designed for sketchnoters. Equipped with no bleed, no show-through paper, you can take almost any marker or pen you can throw at it. Get 10% off with code ARMY at airship.store. Hey everyone, it's Mike Rohde, and I'm here doing the Sketchnote Army podcast live in front of a studio audience with Emily Mills, who actually appeared at least on one episode. We have to verify the archives and see how many she's been on. It may be two others before, but welcome back.
Thank
Emily.
you. Glad to be back.
So when you were on, I think it was pretty early in your career, maybe not at the beginning, but it was pretty early in your career. I think you maybe were independent at the time, and then I think you worked for a company for a while. So let's, instead of doing it this way, let's first say, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, my name is Emily Mills. I'm an illustrator, and that's the big umbrella term that I use now because I do a lot of different types of illustration. And I think for me, sketchnoting falls under that. Yeah. So if I meet Joe Schmo on the street, I'm an illustrator. And then once I get to know you, then it's like I'm a book illustrator, I'm a graphic recorder, I'm a sketchnoter.
You can kind of refine into those sections.
Little buckets.
Got it. And how did you come to that decision about umbrelling underneath Illustrator? Did it go through some iterations?
Yeah, a lot of trial and error because my background is in graphic design. And so for a while it was like, I'm a creative, I'm a designer, and then I stopped doing design and I had to refine the language, and it's always an ever-evolving process. I'm sure it'll change in a year or two.
Got it. And we talked about it in the original episode, but it would be fun to hear now that we have got new period of time that you've been doing this work, your origin story. How did you get into this? And then bring us up to the current day. But you can go all the way back to when you were a little girl if you like, and sort of...
Crayons on the wall.
Yeah. Any kind of key moments that have sort of led to where you are now?
Yeah, so drawing as a kid, really liked that. I started cartooning. I was very inspired by The Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes. I really liked Garfield. Yeah. Just pretty much anything in the newspaper I was a huge fan of. And so I drew comics, cartoons. Growing up, I had a little strip called Sheepish. I had a strip called Busted Wheel. That was like a Western theme one. I had one about dingoes. I was really into animals. And then when I hit middle school, my school was kind of new, and so they started a school newspaper. Okay. And so I did the school newspaper cartoon from 8th grade actually all the way through college.
Wow.
So my background was, I just like drawing, I like characters, I like creating stories that are very short. And then studied graphic design in college because that was around the 2008 crash, and everyone in my life was saying, you have to get a job. And I was like, but I want to do art. So studying graphic design was like my way of doing both, and studied the graphic design, went to graphic design career, but I still kept cartooning. So on my office whiteboard door, I would draw a little cartoon every week. Had a coworker that remembered that when he had left. He went to work for a video studio. They hired me to do a whiteboard video. I'd never heard of that or done one, obviously, and so they brought me in to do that. We ended up doing 2 or 3 of those, and I kind of put that in my portfolio, and then a company saw the whiteboard video, and they were like, hey, have you ever done sketchnoting? I was like, I don't know what that is. But it was kind of like a cool moment because by the time I had hit college, newspapers were basically no more. So my dream of becoming a newspaper cartoonist when I grew up were kind of dashed.
You'd sort of lived that life through your high school and college years. Yeah,
so it was like, I'm going to be a cartoonist for the newspaper when I grow up. And then it was like, oh, newspapers don't exist, so I don't know what to do anymore. I guess it's just graphic design. So when someone told me about sketchnoting, it was like, wait, I can be a cartoonist for real, like when I grow up. It's like another avenue, and so I was excited about that. And my style's more illustratory and less stick figures, more characters, just because that's where my background is. But worked for a company for a short time doing graphic recording, and then went out on my own, and I've just been doing that since 2016.
Great. And I think I've seen you kind of refining the work you've done from that moment you went independent. In a lot of ways, I feel like you've sort of narrowed your focus a lot. Because I think when you started, you were doing graphic design. You're still taking contracts for that. But I think you've sort of narrowed it down to fewer things.
Right.
What would you say it would be your strengths areas that you sort of would lead with, or you consider are your strengths that you do now?
I really like graphic recording at live events. So whether that's a virtual graphic recording gig on my iPad or it's in person at a giant 8-foot board, I really enjoy the live events. I think I just am the most experienced with that, but I also really enjoy book illustration, doing now when people hear that, they think kids lit, and that's not what I do at all. Like, I'm actually not a very whimsical, cute illustrator, and so I don't do kids books, I just do adult business books. But I really think I do have like a cartoony style, but it lends itself well to business ideas. And so I really love illustrating, quote, boring things and kind of creating the life in it.
Making them more interesting.
Yeah.
Or revealing the interesting nature of the concepts or ideas.
Right. And so those are the two areas that I like to lead with, like, let me illustrate your live event. And if you don't have a live event, maybe you have an article or a blog or a book that I can illustrate for. I recently just took a workshop on visual facilitation because after doing live events for almost 10 years, I've learned a lot about meetings, and I've seen a lot of meetings run very poorly. And I'm like, you know what, I think I could learn to do that, and having the people skills to facilitate a room is a skill set that I don't have, but I'm excited about maybe stepping into.
Well, as someone new to that space and knowing graphic recording and sketchnoting and those things, how would you separate the skills needed for graphic recording, live sketchnoting, with now facilitation?
Yeah,
from your perspective?
I think it's a spectrum. So on the far left, you have straight up illustration, like art. And then on the far right, you have facilitation, which is like just writing. And I think in the middle is where it gets confusing. So I would say sketchnoting is probably more on the left-hand side because, of course, it's ideas, not art, but we still like to add color and shapes and creativity. And then as you move towards the facilitation end on the right, you lose the art, but you can still be visual without having the art.
Do you think with facilitation, it's a little bit more of people skills that you're learning?
Definitely.
Because you own the visual skills. That's not an issue.
Right.
You're confident there.
Yeah, the workshop I took was 3 days long, and the first day and a half was really focused on graphic recording, and a lot of the students in the class hadn't done it, so that was their first time. For me, it was actually
you had that advantage.
It was helpful review. I actually did learn a few new things, but the last day and a half was all facilitation. It was reading the room, learning how to deal with, quote, problem children, and learning templates to bring people through problems. And facilitation is also about you not being the star, but the group being the star. So learning to get the focus off of yourself and into the group. Yeah,
you're a little bit like my friend Steve Silbert he is an agile coach, but like a scrum master in his perspective is someone who eliminates blocks from the group. So to let them flow and keep going, in a lot of ways, a facilitator is doing those same things, but in a room, in a meeting, in a set time to kind of like, because I could imagine in a meeting like this, talk about problem children, someone who keeps throwing in some outside of the agreed upon scope of what we're going to talk about and drawing the group into argument or something.
Yeah.
And being able to shut that down and redirect. Those are really important skills.
Yeah, and I think those skills lend themselves well to any profession. Even if I never end up pursuing facilitation, I'm really glad I took the workshop. So
here's a question I didn't think about until we got into this discussion was, what if you're an introvert, someone who's not a people person? Do you think you can be a facilitator, or would that be challenging? Yeah, that's a great question. I think it probably depends on the person, because I think we all express our creativity and introversion and extroversion on a spectrum. And like me, I'm definitely an introvert, but I can turn on the extroversion. But I might step into a facilitation role and thrive, but then I might need to take 2 days off after that. So to restore. Maybe the extrovert can do that, and then they just jump into work the next day. So maybe it's more about the recharging and less about the ability. So sort of knowing yourself. Yeah. So the things you might do as an introvert would be, I know this is stressful for me, so maybe I make sure I get rest on the front end. I do a lot of prep. I know my people, I read my information, which is always good practice, but like maybe that gives an introvert like structure and confidence. And then knowing that I should not organize some brain heavy thing like the day after.
Right.
Would be just knowing yourself so that you don't do things that put yourself in a pinch.
Introverts might actually be in an advantage now that I think about it, because an introvert doesn't want to be the star versus an extrovert.
That's a good point.
Who gets to be a facilitator. They're just like, oh my gosh, look at all these people looking at me. This is great. Versus an introvert who's like, let's get the attention off of me as soon as possible.
Yeah. I've been fascinated with restaurant stuff lately, and you think about like, so there's back of house and front of house. So the back of house where they make the food, the front of house is where they take the orders, but there's someone who they call it manning the pass or running the pass. So you're the one in between those two places. So you take all the heat from the customers, but you don't often tell the people in back. You relay it in a nice way. And then you got to yell at these guys, hey, I need a hamburger. Come on, I need a hamburger. And you're sort of managing the expectations of the front of the house. So in a lot of ways, that facilitator's a little bit like that role.
That's cool, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
So interesting. And so you've done this education. Do you have a sense whether that makes sense as another offering you might offer? Or is that an experimentation you're going to do?
It's definitely an experimentation. I think just having done graphic recording for 9 years, I don't feel stagnant. I just am always looking to make things better. And I think it's easy to hit a wall and just stay there because I'm comfortable and it's, I've hit my groove, I've hit my stride, I know what to do. But once I just keep showing up in the same way, it's like, I don't think I could keep going like this forever. How can I don't know, shake things up? That's the best way I can phrase it.
And expand your skills so you could, if the job was maybe, coming back to this is, I've heard in past discussions with people who do this work that often they'll have a facilitator and a visual person together in a room, because you tend to then, it's really hard to do both. It can be done. There are people that are really good that can do it. The first one that comes to mind is Brandy Agerbeck.
Right.
Really good at both, right? But that's like the unicorn skill, right? To be able to both do management, manage the room, stop the annoying kids from causing trouble, and getting visuals on the wall is really challenging.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Did they talk at all about that kind of setup where you maybe partner with someone?
Yeah, they did. They mentioned it's good to have all the skills so you can do what you can by yourself to the ability that you can. The instructor said he always works with another graphic recorder, and even if he knows how to graphic record, he hires somebody else because they're passive. They're in the background constantly capturing, and then he can always interact with them because he has that graphic recorder experience. They speak the same language. He can direct them in a way that helps create that artifact for the group that I think a graphic recorder could do by themselves, but the facilitator can help direct the graphic recorder. So many times we get in a live event and we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if the speaker's going to go over or if something's actually important or if it's a tangent. The facilitator can tell the graphic recorder, this is a tangent, don't capture it. Or this is actually really important, draw that huge. So it could be a really cool partnership.
That makes me think too, like the way you partner. So you could have two graphic recorder facilitators, like a tag team in wrestling, right? Like, ding, and you tag in, and this person goes to the wall and they're drawing while this person's facilitating, and then you would switch back, and you could have this kind of dual thing. Like maybe there's strengths that one person has that the other doesn't have, and you get more out of that situation. Yeah,
I think partnerships would be really important moving into a group like that.
And I imagine too, as you do that work, like a facilitator might say, I can do visuals, but it's not my strength. I really like the facilitation role. And they look for people who understand the dynamic but can do the wall stuff. And then the people that do the wall stuff could then have these partnerships and know, okay, I got this situation where I need a strong facilitator so I can focus on the visuals because it's important. Then you would partner. So you have these options to kind of mix and match based on what you want to do. So I heard you telling a story, and this will be our last discussion on this space because it's really fascinating, is you were just at the IFVP event in New Jersey.
That's right.
And you sort of put yourself out there to say, hey, I will sketchnote the opening session, and then suddenly you got called up to the front. So tell us that story. I don't want to lead too much with details. So.
Sure. So IFBP is the International Forum of Visual Practitioners. They have a conference every year. For the keynotes and some of the workshops, they had a sign-up sheet for graphic recording those sessions kind of on stage to the side. And it was just like, hey, if you want to practice, get your practice in. And so I just signed up for the first keynote because I thought it'd be fun.
And you said nobody else signed up for it either, right?
Right. No one else. The keynote speaker is a facilitator and a consultant who's very experienced. He's written books. And so I think people were a little weary of, or wary of recording in front of him. It was like high pressure, but I didn't know who the man was. I'd never heard of him before.
And what was his name?
Chris McGough.
Okay. I don't know him either. So, I mean, now I'm learning things.
Yeah, we're all learning together. And so I guess some people were a little intimidated by that, but since I didn't know any better. So
Which is probably maybe the good trouble you can get yourself into, right?
Yeah, so I signed up. I got there early and I made a little title. Chris pulled me aside a short minute beforehand and said, we're going to work together. It'll be fine. And it was
what does that mean?
I was like, what does that mean? Because I'm very used to being in the back of the room. No one talks to me. No one interacts with me. It's kind of different that it was on stage, but it's IFVP. We're all watching each other as professionals. So I kind of understood it. Well, then he gets 10 minutes into his keynote, and which is about facilitation and working with a graphic recorder. And it was kind of meta. He was like, and the artifact that Emily is creating is really important. So why is she off in the corner? Let's bring her up to center stage.
So used as an opportunity to do a
teaching
lesson.
moment.
Yes.
So he brings me on center stage. That was kind of intimidating. Again, I'm used to being in the corner, and I love the corner.
And as an introvert, that's your place you want to be, your happy place in a lot of ways.
We like my dark, happy corner. So then he brings me up, and then he talks about how it's a partnership. Like we were just saying, the facilitator and the graphic recorder have experience with each other's skills and strengths, and so they can work together. So he was saying, we're working together as a team, and we also want to involve the group. So he stopped kind of the keynote and reached out to the audience and was like, okay, so we're about 45 minutes into this presentation. What did she miss? Is there anything missing from this graphic recording that is important enough to add back in? There were some comments about gender. There were some comments about what kinds of drawings were there. Chris also had 2 flip charts that he was working on. And so some of his images didn't get translated onto mine because I was busy drawing what he was saying, not what he was drawing. So I was like, well, he's got the flip chart. Should I like copy that? We already have one version. That was like a lot for me to navigate.
2 streams of information and you have to make decisions, yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a little overwhelming. And so I was just like making quick decisions in the moment saying, well, it's already on a flip chart. I don't want to copy it. I'd rather just continue moving on.
You could capture it later if you needed to.
Right, because it's written down. I feel good about that. But then when he polled the audience, it was like, well, the thing Chris drew is actually missing. We need to put it on the artifact. So, but I actually really enjoyed that process of involving the audience and getting their opinion because it's for them. So it's great that I have this lens that I'm listening through, but if this artifact is for them, why don't they get a say? So that was a new concept for me. It kind of blew my mind. I was like, that was actually really fun. It was stressful, but it was fun.
And I guess that sort of reminds you that you're just one individual with 2 ears doing your best.
Right.
And you can't be omniscient and know everything and stop time and rewind it and stuff in a live moment. So it's a good reminder.
Oh, that also reminded me. So when people were giving their feedback, I also kind of just came to this realization on stage, like, I can't please everybody in this audience. And so I had to make decisions based on what I thought would be good for the group as well. So one person said, add more emotion and color, and some person was like, it's great as it is, don't change anything. I can't please both people.
Right, they're going 2 different directions.
Right, so you just have to pick one, and someone's going to have their feelings hurt, and that's just the reality of the world.
Well, and I think if I'm not mistaken, graphic recording, there's a real emphasis to try and be as neutral as possible.
Right.
Right, and it's impossible to be completely neutral because you have a perspective.
Right. We're all biased.
So that you just have to accept, and you try your best to kind of neutralize that. But I mean, probably in the moment it wasn't great to have people like throwing darts at you. Like, Emily did this wrong, you did that wrong.
Yeah, afterwards I had a few people come up to me and say, I would have cried if I had been put on the spot like that, or, oh, I'm glad it wasn't me.
Yeah. But I think, that's when you learn, and I think the other thing too is just like here at this conference, you're kind of among friends and people who, they're not there to beat you up. They want to improve.
Right.
So you learn. So you take all of that in that context, which is really good.
Yeah. If it had been any other conference, I would have been probably way more scared to do it. But if it's like, oh, we're all graphic recorders here, it's okay.
It was a lesson for everyone else too. They were taking notes. I think back in time of moments when I've done that kind of facilitation. It wasn't that formal, but I worked in a software company. I was the only designer, and there were 50 developers and project managers and stuff. And the way I just made the decision because I knew I was a bottleneck. How can I alleviate a little bit of this bottleneck? So our solution was a business analyst and I we had a big whiteboard in the space, and we had Whiteboard Mondays. And so Whiteboard Mondays, teams would rotate through and say, okay, what's the feature you're working on? Let's look at how it's done in the old app that we're replacing. Let's talk about what kind of stuff we think would be cool. And while we're doing that, Mike will go up and draw what you're saying. And I would talk with people and try to capture that. So I would draw and then annotate in another color.
Cool.
And the cool thing was we sort of got into a rhythm where they got to expect and know how it worked. And I loved it when someone would say, hey, I have this idea, can I draw it? I was like, yes. So I'd hand the marker off and they would draw their thing. I wouldn't redraw it. We would just leave it the way it was.
That's cool.
But they felt confident enough that they could come up and express their ideas. And what I found was some of the most difficult features needed the developers to come up. And the other thing was we would do sessions like, I remember one session, it took like 4 or 5 or 6 iterations of sessions rehashing that idea because it was complex. I think on the 7th one, before everybody came up, I drew like a tombstone and said, the feature, I wrote the feature on the tombstone, and we were just having fun with it. But I think people really appreciated it, and some of the most innovative stuff was those hash out sessions where you had to go over it again, and developers are drawing, but we came up with really cool stuff that way. And I think probably in the end, seeing that it was facilitated, that was most interesting was if someone said, well, who designed that feature? It's like, we all did.
Yeah.
It wasn't me, it wasn't John, it wasn't Mary, it was all of us together. We're feeding and building this thing and reacting and giving comments. And ultimately the sketches we did would then be taken by a developer and built. And there was modifications at that level, but that was kind of a cool feeling to feel like this is a real collaborative environment.
And that's probably not all on your shoulders if something fails.
Right, you're just one part of the team. And
right.
Even if things would go wrong, we would correct it. So there was always this feeling like there was the ability to have a say and correct things as we went through the process. So that was I really enjoyed that. Now that is in a comfort zone for me. I knew that topic and I had a system. I wonder how I would do in unknown topics, and that's the challenge, right? You're always going into these unknown topics and trying to make sense of them. But I guess you have the advantage of being an outsider. You sort of hear and see things that the insiders miss because it's now a blind spot for them. So that's really interesting. That's exciting to hear that you're doing that and you're thinking about adding that, augmenting your skills that way.
See what happens.
Yeah, that's really great. Maybe you'll get some work from this. I don't know. So we'll see. And probably the other thing that I think is big since you were on last, at least that I'm aware of, is you were single at that point, and now you're married. You also lived, I think, in Nashville at the time, and now you live somewhere else. So talk a little bit about the transition personally and where you're at.
So I met my husband in Nashville. We were actually both from Colorado, and we both moved to Nashville for job opportunities, and then we met at a drawing event that I was hosting called Drawing and Donuts.
I remember you promoting that, yeah.
So that worked out great. We were in Nashville 7 years total, and neither of us are really big city people. I grew up in Colorado Springs. He grew up in Pueblo, which is like south of Colorado Springs. And I think we're both introverts. He's a little bit more extroverted than I am. So big cities just aren't really our vibe. That's the best way I can put it. And so we also just had trouble connecting. I think Nashville's a different culture than we were used to. The South is very different from the Rockies and even the West Coast. So we just couldn't really adapt and fit in. And it just got old after 7 years.
Banging your head against the wall for 7 years, right?
Right. And we just kept renewing our lease, like, I guess we'll stay. But after the pandemic, my in-laws, one of them retired and said, hey, we're going to go on a grandkid tour. Why don't you come live in our house for free for a year? And so we were like, yes.
Wow.
Saving money is always a great thing, especially after the pandemic. And we wanted to buy a house, and Nashville was booming even more than it was when we moved there.
Super difficult to find anything.
Yeah, we were just kind of getting priced out, and we didn't love it. So it's like, why are we here?
Right.
So we just decided to go live with my in-laws for a year and then just figure that out. We kind of thought maybe we'll go back to Nashville, or maybe we'll go to Colorado, or maybe there's something else that we haven't thought about. So that was just a very temporary, like, hey, let's go figure it out. Just take the next step and we'll figure it out as we go. So we lived in my in-laws' house for a year, and we loved it so much we stayed. So we moved out, got our own little rental in Bend, Oregon. It just really, we loved the culture there. We got connected to a church community really quickly. We made friends faster in Bend than we did in Nashville. And so it just felt like a really good personal fit. I was a little worried moving from a city to a smaller city for work, because I do live events and all these conferences. And my work has shifted. I obviously don't do as many big conferences anymore, but I am doing a lot more virtual events.
Which has also changed after the pandemic.
Right. That's as people have been asking me here at the conference, how much are you working? What's your travel ratio? What's your graphic recording to illustration ratio? And I just say, I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer. Everything's been weird since the pandemic. Like some years have been really great, and other years it's been a struggle, and I can't really pinpoint it to any one thing. But I just kind of have a lot of things factoring into why business might be good or bad, and moving and pandemics don't really help with your data.
Yeah, it's kind of all mixed up.
Yeah.
So it sounds like an alignment. You found the right alignment. It sounds like even making friends with people was probably due to alignment, like it aligned with the way you guys thought and were. Yeah,
and I think just I'm happier in drier climates than I am in humid ones. And
I think everybody is, maybe.
I got into birding during the pandemic. That was my hobby. And so Nashville has great birds. And then we moved to Bend, and it was just like, ooh, new birds. And so like spending out time outside hiking and discovering the nature there has just been like personally fulfilling and really fun. I feel like I was creatively stifled in Nashville because it wasn't a personal fit. And now that I'm in Bend, I feel like I'm personally thriving, but professionally it's a little wonky still.
But maybe I think that will come into alignment because you're personally aligned, so that which is, you're talking about doing facilitation, so that's another challenge. And I would suspect that's a kind of a thing that you have to do in person more often than virtually, which is probably also a challenge for you, right? It's not, you can't be in your dark corner, you got to step out. Even though you're not the center of attention, it requires you to physically be somewhere. Yeah, and Bend is a resort town, so a lot of professionals from California and Portland and Seattle come to Bend for their retreats. So I kind of see an opportunity for maybe being a local facilitator, graphic recorder at these resorts. Maybe they don't have to bring in somebody from out of town. Maybe I can be the option. You wouldn't travel anywhere. Yeah. And so does Bend also offer a reasonably large airport so you can get places easily? Yeah, we have about 5 airlines. We have 2 baggage claims. It's a tiny little airport, but it connects to a good number of places. Oh, that's good. Well, and if you've got resorts there, people are at least coming in, which means they have to go out again. Right. So seems like it's worked out pretty well. Well, I'm only 2 years in, so I guess it can only go up from here. Well, you've always got options, The Sketchnote Army podcast is brought to you by the Concepts Sketchnote Workshop video, a unique, free, hands-on workshop video where I show you how I use the Concepts app to create sketchnotes on an iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil. In this 1 hour, 18-minute video, I cover the infinite canvas as a sketchnoting power feature, how vectors give you complete control of brushes and sizing as you create sketchnotes, and how vector elements let you size and repurpose your drawings for ultimate flexibility. The workshop video includes answers to common questions about concepts. Watch the workshop video for free at rodesign.com/concepts. Be sure to download the Concepts app at concepts.app and follow along with me during the workshop. See you there. So let's talk a little bit about tools. We talked in the past, I don't even remember what tools you said. I'm sure you used Neuland markers at the time. What are you using now, and are there new things that you've discovered that you might want to share that people can check out? Yeah, one thing I've learned in the past couple of years is I just got really bogged down in my tools. They were kind of holding me back. So I used to use this
gosh, whatever that standard moleskin size is, like the half page.
5x8?
Yeah, 5x8. That was my go-to for eons. And then I realized I wasn't creating as many sketch notes because the page was too big. It just felt like a lot of work, and I was like really busy with illustration, and so my fun sketch notes kind of took the back burner. It became work, and I was like, it's too much to do, it's going to take too long, so I just stopped. But once I got a smaller sketchbook, I felt like I was doing it way more often. I switched to these pocket moleskin sketchbooks that are...
And they're kind of horizontal, right?
They're like a 3x5. Yeah. You can orient them horizontally or vertically. Yeah. I really like those. I'm kind of vacillating between those and a, see if I can remember the brand name, Handbook. It says hand.book on the cover. It's a sketch note or sketchbook that I found. Mike Lowry, who's an illustrator, uses them a lot. Okay. I got the tip from him about these sketchbooks, and they're square. I think it's maybe 5 or 6x6. Okay. The paper's pretty thick, and I really like those. So I usually have one of those 2 sketchbooks with me.
Going on, okay. And I suppose the other thing too is those smaller books. A lot of the reason when I started sketchnoting, I used a pocket-sized moleskin was because I could stick it in my pocket.
Yep.
And only travel with a pen and the book, and I was always ready to go at any time. So, like cycling or birding or hiking. Yep. That's the kind of thing you could take anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, the big moleskin journals, I never took them anywhere.
Too clunky.
My purse wasn't big enough.
Now, what about pens and things? Have you found any different? Have you gotten into any watercolors or anything like that? Like, what stuff are you using?
Yeah, I like, U Brands has a felt tip pen. They're pretty similar to Microns. You can buy them at Target or Office Max. Okay. I really like those. They're not very black, but they're pretty light, not light fast. They don't bleed. So I can write with the U Brands pen and then put yellow over it, and it doesn't bleed. Okay. And I love that. And they don't bleed through the paper, which is great. Bleed through is my #1 pet peeve right now.
Okay.
I do like Tombow Mono Twin pens, I love those but too. Those bleed, but they're also really black, so it's like pros and cons.
Trade-off, yeah.
And then I don't really do watercolor. I'm still pretty much on the marker train. I use Tombow dual brush pens and Zebra mild liner brush pens. Neuland. I don't have the fine tip Neulands as much. The ones I have are probably 10 years old, so the nibs are starting to wear out, and I haven't replaced them. But Neuland find ones, and then iPad, I use Adobe Fresco.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe you're not doing as much board work as maybe you have in the past. If your Neulands are getting old and they're getting frayed.
Well, those are the fine ones. I still have the #1s and the big ones that I use for the board work. But yeah, board work has definitely decreased over the years.
So there's an interesting company called Art Toolkit. We interviewed the person who runs that right in Oregon, up the coast, I think, Port Townsend. I'm not sure how that
that's in
relates.
Washington.
So that's in Washington, and that's Maria Coriel Martin.
Oh, cool.
And so she does something called Art Toolkit. She's really interesting. You'd probably really vibe with her. And she went on like expeditions. And so she kept on like squeezing her tools down. She's into watercolor, but what she's produced now is like these little zip up books with the nylon, like ballistic nylon cover. Inside you can put whatever notebook you want. And then these little square tins, and you can buy the colors you want, and they're magnetic.
I've seen those.
And you snap them in this little thing, and then they include a water, like a syringe, so you can like suck up water from a stream, and then you can do watercoloring with it.
That's so cool. I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah, so they make little kits, so it's called Art Toolkit. We'll put a link in the show notes, and then the link to her interview. So that's kind of cool if someone's listening or watching and into outdoors.
Yeah.
I've got one that she sent me, and I took it on a train trip we did with our family, and it was a lot of fun. I need to do more outdoor stuff so I can actually use the dumb thing. So I don't feel like I've lived up to her expectations, but she's always really nice about that. So
that's cool.
Well, that's really cool. We typically do tips. I don't even remember what tips we did back in the old days.
Me neither.
So the way I frame it is someone's listening or watching, they're a visual thinker, whatever that means to them. And maybe they've hit a plateau or they're just stuck. What would you say to someone like that to encourage them or to give them ideas for how to maybe break out of it or do something new?
Yeah, I would say just keep experimenting. I've been doing visualization for almost 10 years, and I feel like I've hit those plateaus before, and sometimes the experimentation looks bad and it feels bad, and it feels like you're stepping backwards, but that's actually making progress. So just keep experimenting is my advice.
Cool. Give me 2 other tips.
Ooh,
I'm going to go for
tips.
3. Yeah, see if I can get 2 more out of you.
Ooh, let's see.
Kind of on the spot. Sorry.
I would say maybe try something outside of your practice, but still creative. So take a pottery class, go for a photography outdoor walk, or, just something creative that you wouldn't normally sign up for. Because I think so much of our creative advice really translate across fields. And sometimes it's fun to go eavesdrop on another field and see what you can learn from it.
Yeah, for me, that's been learning how to bake bread and make pizza.
Oh my gosh, your pizza. I'm gluten-free now, so every time I see it.
We're going gluten-free, so we're having to figure that out. But
no.
yeah, I think we're going sourdough probably, so that helps. But yeah, that was my experimental space and I think it's important to be a beginner somewhere.
Yeah.
And then you can, like I've always talked about, overlaying, so the sketchnoting skill overlaid on something, like for you birding or cycling or hiking or whatever, travel, your travel work that you've done. So
yeah.
Oh.
I think one last tip would be just be very careful of when sketchnoting becomes work. So whether it feels like work because it's too big, too intimidating, too complex, or if it's work because maybe you're starting to do it professionally, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be aware of when it starts to feel like work, and then find something else to supplement that joy factor. Because the sketchnoting can have joy, but if work is attached to it, maybe there's something else to fill the joy bucket.
Yeah, that switches the pressure, which isn't helpful sometimes. So 2 things I wanted to mention before we go. Number 1, you've got a great book, The Art of Visual Note Taking. Tell us a little bit about the status of that now, because I think when we first had you on, it was like brand new. I think maybe it launched or it was close to launching. Maybe it was just before it launched. And now it's been a while. Tell us how long it's been out and how it's selling and what's your experience?
Yeah, it turned 5 years old in March.
Wow.
Or May, sometime last spring or this spring. My publishing numbers are always 6 months behind, and my last numbers were 19,700.
Wow, that's great.
There. So it's doing pretty good. My agent called me a while back, and he was saying it's time to start thinking about book number 2. But I'm actually pretty stuck there. I don't know what to write about next. I don't have an inspiring idea. So that's something I have a Post-it system that I use every week, and my back burner section is just stuff that I should think about. And my second book idea is just always in the percolation section.
Sometimes it just has to percolate for a while.
Oh yeah. I don't want to rush it.
Yep. And then the other thing I was going to mention too was I really loved when you traveled to Sweden and Norway and I think Finland and Scotland or something like that.
Yeah, we went to 6 countries in 3 weeks.
I couldn't keep up, but you did really beautiful. And I think you were experimenting with those notebooks you talked about, right? The ones that could either be vertical or horizontal. Tell us, what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I've looked at travel sketch notes a lot, and I was so inspired, and I wanted to do it. That was my first time in Europe and traveling overseas, so I really wanted to capture it. And so I made a commitment. I have to sketch every day. Like before I go to sleep, I have to sketch at least 1 page. It doesn't have to be a whole spread, but knowing me, it's just like overdone. There's like 5 pages for day 1. So I had to actually adjust expectations and like simple down instead of just overdoing it, because it's like, I'm jet lagged. I want to go to bed really bad right now. I'm just going to do 1 page. So I was kind of taking care of myself at the same time, but wanting to document visually and like a journal so I can remember what we did and where we went. So I had pages where it was kind of a traditional sketch note where it's like little popcorns with a path of the time. And then I had others that was just text with a little icon here and there. And I really had fun and played with it. So I have spreads that are all realistic sketches, and then I have pages with cartoons. So it's just kind of everything. Yeah,
it was fun for me to go through and see your experimentation and how you're changing. I think later on you got sick. So you were like dealing with that, like, okay, I made this agreement I have to do one. What if you're sick? How do you deal with that? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I don't know what I had, whether it was flu or COVID or something like that, but we got to Scotland and I was just fevery. We got off the plane and it was raining and the rain felt so good. It's just like, oh, thank goodness we're in a cold place, because Paris was so hot. So we landed, we got to the Airbnb, and I just slept for like 3 days.
Wow.
I did not sketch. I thought about it. I was like,
I think that's probably where you can let yourself out of that agreement.
I did. And so then I caught up afterwards. I left a couple blank pages saying, okay, nothing happened. I was in bed for 3 days. We'll just
draw the picture.
I'll just do a journal entry there, and then we went to Berwick upon Tweed for a little half-day trip, and I started that sketch the next day. And then after we got home, that's when I kind of did the journaling about being sick, because it was less interesting.
And then you could reflect on it a little bit.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah, that's really cool. I thought that was a lot of fun, and we'll of course include the link to the book and the travel sketch notes so people can check it out. So, well, it's been so good to have you on the show in this unusual setting.
Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure to listen and be on the Sketchnote Army podcast.
Not a problem. So for whoever's watching or listening, this wraps another episode. Till next time, talk to you soon. The Sketchnote Army podcast was created by me, Mike Rohde, and brought to you by Rohdesign Studios. It's produced and edited by Alec Polianis of AMP Creative Studios. The theme music was created by John Schiedermeyer. To support the creation of this show, I invite you to buy one of my books, the Sketchnote Handbook or the Sketchnote Workbook. You can find the books on Amazon or go to peachpit.com and use the code ROHDE40 for 40% off. Please share this podcast with other visual thinking friends, and be sure to leave a nice rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app so others can find the show.